minor PTSD every time I have to watch it. So anyway, but I'm happy to answer any question.
So when was this filmed, and kind of will you update us on how things are now, what the situation is?
Sure. This film was finished in 2014, am I right? But you finished filming it in 2013. So that was many years ago. Sabrina has graduated from Pitzer. She's got a job in Beverly Hills, which she's so thrilled about. She's working for a Jewish Special Needs Trust. Interesting. Which we're thrilled about. She, of course, wanted to be an actress. We were not thrilled about that, but we shut our mouth. And Fu is now the abbess at Green Gulch. We no longer live together. I live in senior housing and assisted living facility, which is fine. Every Friday, we mobilize against the next war, whatever that next war might be. We've also taken up a collection to assassinate Trump because we're all so old that we're not worried about any repercussions. Repercussions. No, but we've got plans about Pence for the whole ball of game. You know, we're not. This is a red diaper baby senior living facility.
I first of all thank you. My name is Wade. This is such a grace. It's really grace. I thank you for your life. This is beautiful.
Thank you.
It's such a treat to watch.
Thank
And
you.
then all the way I watch it, I said, well, I'm a Christian. I said, well, if that happened to me, how do I take each step? I'll probably use the Zen mentality and still feel like God too. It's how people go through Zen meditation and learn how to, step one at a time. And the other thing is, did you ever finish your robe?
I did.
I was going to add that.
I finished sewing. I finished all, wasn't 50,000 stitches. I tend to hyperbolize. That has not changed. But it was only 25,000. But I did finish it. And I'm still struggling with whether or not I'm going to ever become a priest. I mean, our practice is very formal, meaning very body-based. And it's not like I can do the forms exactly, totally, perfectly, as anybody can notice. But nonetheless, I've still got one foot in that door. Exactly. But I've got to tell you, I miss the old place. The old place is beautiful. And, very much, you're going to hear Victoria Sweet tomorrow talk about God's Hotel. She's talking about Laguna Honda, which is she gives a great talk. That's a great book. So just go and listen to it. And you'll learn something different. It was grim, but those of us who went there, and those of us who said, I can't stand it here. I mean, my first night I was on call, I just about ran out screaming just because there were so many ghosts around. It was grim. But nonetheless, I came back 2 weeks later, and I never will leave. Never will leave now. Because it's a small town of people who are totally committed and we get to practice medicine the way we really want to. I mean, being in the public sector still is the best thing from my perspective, having been in private practice, having worked for the university, having worked for the city and county of San Francisco, I can say with all clarity, working for the city and county of San Francisco has been great.
I just want to add a little anecdote about Laguna Honda and the footage that you saw where it just so happened that the day we shot there, they were moving into the brand-new renovated facility. But Grace, we followed her around for 3-4 years. And actually, Mark Lippman, who's the co-director, did all the filming and the sound and everything. It was basically us as the crew. But and we would keep saying to Grace, "You got to tell us when things are happening, Grace. You got to tell us when you have appointments. You got to tell us when you're doing special things. We want to be there. Mark wants to be there." And we went to the Leonard Cohen concert. We love Leonard Cohen. Gone to several of his concerts, but we were at a Leonard Cohen concert at the Paramount Theater in Oakland, and it was like midnight, and we said, "So what are you doing tomorrow?" Or what? And she said, "Well, Danny and I are going to say goodbye to the spirits at Laguna Honda Hospital, and they're closing the old ward and opening up." And we said, "You're kidding," like. Why didn't you tell us? Anyway, and the next thing we know, the next morning, it's pouring rain, and Danny and Grace, we met them there, and it was just this Danny had his Leonard Cohen hat on, that's right, but we just walked around I think I had been there years and years ago to visit you, but there was something just profound about being there as the gurneys and the patients were being moved out of this old, incredible, seemingly decrepit, but very, very powerful, just kind of this amazing space. And we got to film Grace and Dan, walking around and just telling stories about kind of the old days of being there, and then going into this brand new state-of-the-art facility. It was really a pretty magical moment that we're very happy is in the movie, Grace.
Can I just put it? Yeah. It's amazing. Did any of you go to see When We Rise, the film that was recently, right? Anyway, Deanna Jones, who's one of the people in that film, and I were talking about San Francisco General, the AIDS crisis, and what it was for all of us at that time. Laguna Honda still has 60 devoted beds to AIDS care. There are no beds at San Francisco General anymore. There are no beds at UCSF either. There are no beds at the VA. There are no beds at St. Mary's. Laguna Honda Hospital has the only designated AIDS bed still in the city. So it's very poignant.
It's also a testimony to the fact that AIDS is a chronic
Right,
illness now,
right,
and
right.
So we have the, I have the great honor of having the talk with Grace and the
Right.
junior residents. And
She was our junior resident.
I know, and earlier today we had the Memorial residents come and sang our Hernandez.
I heard that. I saw it.
Anyhow, but yeah, we were AIDS doctors. 5A was a happy, sad place, a beautiful place.
How did you all connect together and doing this documentary? How do you feel about the whole process of being part of that? Also, I'm curious about
Yeah.
how did you meet and then your experience with this whole reality, kind of really.
Yeah, so I'll answer the first part, you can answer the second. So Grace and I are old dear friends. So we've known each other for over 25 years now. And 30, now it's 35, that's a little hyperbolicized, whatever. 30 years. Long time. So, yes, I mean, that's exactly right. And I don't think we could have made this particular film, had we not been close friends. And, Grace and Fu and Sabrina really opened their lives to us, and, we kind of became family. And when she said it was a labor of love, it really was on Mark's and my part, but also kind of all of us, just kind of giving ourselves over, us as witnesses to what was happening. And then Grace and Fu and Sabrina were just remarkably vulnerable and open, and neither Grace nor Fu ever kind of I mean, there were a couple times where they, I think wish we weren't around. It was like really hard at times, but we were never kicked out. And we were never, they really sort of let us make a film about them, and didn't try to edit, help us, kind of censor anything. The only thing that Grace, and this was really after we had come close to finishing, the only thing Grace really did not want in the film was a picture. We had an MRI, an X-ray of her brain bleeds right after the accident, and it was, no, it was very dramatic. And I think the fact that she had gone back and was practicing as a physician, I think she really didn't want the liability or the
The city attorney would have any kind of thoughts for me, because I had opened the door for all kinds of acts of legality against them. They were having to, they would have to defend me, because then I was reemployed. So I thought, you can see one thing. I think there's one picture of and it goes up just as far as the bleeds start, just where the bleeds start.
it's mostly the broken bones and such.
Watching this again, is that something you really?
Right, want to be seen. But she can answer her question about what it was like to, to have us following you around, making a film about you.
Well, actually, when I think about it, I mean, how many people get to have that kind of scrutiny? I mean, to watch yourself on tape for 75 minutes, it's daunting on the one hand. On the other hand, I truly feel witnessed. I have to witness myself. So it was great. I mean, it was just, there was no question about it. There were two feelings that I had when I first was in the accident. Number one, that something good should come out of it for somebody. So this was the film getting made. That was the reason that I'd agreed to it after we stopped laughing about it. And then, anyway, I was frankly very brain damaged initially. That's why I agreed. That's really why I agreed. I had no choice. I was saying yes to everything. I mean, at one point they asked me if I would give the keynote address. This was still when I was in rehab. They asked me to give the keynote address for his Dalai Lama. And I couldn't even put two sentences together at that point. But we spent, the whole time I was in rehab, my speech therapy was all about writing this speech, this 10-minute speech, which wasn't a bad thing to have happen. But nonetheless, and I was convinced that His Holiness was about to go into respiratory arrest because he was breathing so quickly. Now, of course, so I was sitting there doing my code blue scenario because I had to run one in at least a year. And I thought, the Secret Service people, they don't know anything about running a code blue. What am I going to do? And I thought, I can't move my arms at all. So I'm going to have to talk to Fu. So I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to get ready to give my talk. And I am so worried about him. But he was equally worried about me. He thought, this woman hasn't been out of the hospital for a year, solid year. So she got discharged just to have to come and give this talk. So I better take care of her. So he's coming over, nuzzling my forehead, adjusting my mic all the time, saying, be quiet, talk louder. You're doing great, Grace. So we really had a love fest. But and that probably wouldn't have happened at all if the film wasn't being made. I don't know why I say that, but I do know that that was somehow part of it. So it was a great experience.
We did have some of that footage at one point in the film, but there's a lot of amazing stuff that's on the cutting room floor that just, as the story, as the edit was unfolding, the film just became more and more of a kind of intimate portrait of the family and kind of what happened to Grace in relation to her family. And I don't know, you didn't see much of the credits, but we interviewed a lot of different people for the film too, and they all kind of went by the wayside as we, just got into more of the really kind of raw and personal dimension of the story. Yeah. As we were filming, that's an interesting question. And, you know, we started out, unlike a lot of documentary films that Mark and I have made, you know, that a lot of films start out with kind of a vision, like you're going to tell a story, you have a point of view, you want you want to move people in a certain way. This film didn't have any of that. I mean, during the year that Grace was in the hospital, we were kind of blown away by how she was handling it and managing. I mean, it was very inspirational. But when we first started filming, and we didn't start filming until she was discharged from the hospital after a year. So that whole first year, other than the still photographs that you saw, you know, of when she had the trach and on the tilt table, it's really just like those two pictures. There's nothing from the first year. So we just started following her. It was we had no idea what was going to be happening. So we didn't really have a sense of what we were shooting for, as it were. And I think at some point we did really realize that Fu was going to be a much bigger character than we had initially imagined. But it was really in the edit room. And we did hire a close friend of ours who's an amazing editor, Kenji Yamamoto, who lives in the Bay Area. And he didn't want to meet Grace or Fu at all until after the film was done. And he kind of held a more objective and sort of impartial view as a filmmaker. Because for me, especially as Grace's old friend, it was actually very challenging to direct this film throughout the whole process. But the editing was, I don't know what I would have done if we hadn't had Kenji there to kind of, and he really advocated for kind of having that more of a focus on the family. Grace it was a little challenging at one point when we talked, and sort of Grace realized that's what it was going to be. It was, yeah, the end. I mean, there were some really, really tough times, and times that we'd show up and I did all the interviews. Mark was filming, and it was we would have these sort of sessions, and some of them were very, very painful. There was one point where Grace and I were both like, "This is a horrible movie. We don't want to make this movie. This sucks." You know, just. We were both crying, you know, it was just like, ugh, and we were trying to figure out how to end it. That's right, you know, and Mark and I would sit around, you know, at one point it was like Grace was going to climb, you know, a mountain in the Himalayas or something. Get back on a surfboard, right? But actually, very quickly, I think we realized it wasn't going to be one of those sort of hero, you know, we see Grace as incredibly heroic, but the story really became a lot more about the way that she kind of came to terms with what was happening and the limitations that she was going to be dealing with in her life. And that became, you know, just this very, very poignant, you know, story in and of itself.